I'll start the class. This is week 5 of the TS session of Structure Analysis 1, taught by Professor Amit Shah. I am Trisha Chakraborty, one of the course teaching assistants. I am a PhD student at the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. We will start with a brief recap of the previous 4 weeks. In week one, we looked at the four types of internal forces. They are axial force, torsional moment, bending moment, and shear force. So axial force and torsional moment are both have the direction along the length of the member, and shear force and bending moment are transverse to the member. So they are paired together generally, and axial force and the twisting moment acts like this. So the sense is basically along the length, and due to a transverse force which is called a shear force, a bending moment also develops in the beam. Then we looked at the common classification of elements and boundary conditions. Some of the elements that we encounter in structural analysis are beam elements, frame elements, and truss elements. Truss elements only undergo axial force, so they are pinned at all the nodes that in a truss are pinned. They do not provide any rotational constraint. So they do not provide any moment. They only transfer vertical or horizontal forces, and every member of the truss is either under tension or compression. It does not have any transverse loading. And if for a beam element, it a beam element does not have any axial loading. It only has shear force and bending moment. So there can be transverse force, that is shear force. Some moment develops due to that. It can also have a concentrated moment apply or concentrated bending moment applied. And a frame element is one that can be subjected to all three of these: axial force, bending moment, and shear force. And some common boundary conditions are: there is a roller support which provides restraint in the perpendicular direction to which it is placed. There is pinned or hinged support that provides displacement restraints in two perpendicular directions. So in the 2D plane, and in the 3D plane, it provides restraint in all three perpendicular directions. And the fixed support provides, so the pinned or hinge support does not provide any rotational fixity. So if it is pinned at this point, the beam is free to do this. But if it is fixed at one end, then it can neither displace in any direction nor rotate in any direction. So a fixed support is capable of providing the force in the x direction, y direction, and also a moment, restraining moment in the z direction. Then we looked at structural indeterminacy. There are two types: internal and external indeterminacy. The external one is basically, it concerns the number of support reactions. In the 2D plane, there are three equilibrium equations, and if there are three support reactions, the structure is just stable. If there are more than three support reactions, there is some kind of redundancy. So if suppose in a beam there is a fixed support and a roller support, then even if the roller support fails, or even if one of the components of the fixed support, for example the moment restraint, fails, the structure will still be stable. So that is a redundancy. So it is 1 degree indeterminate if it has four support reactions. If it has 5, 6, it will be more and more degree indeterminate. And if the degree of indeterminacy is negative, that is, there are less number of support reactions than the number of equilibrium equations, it is an unstable system. For example, a beam that rests on two roller supports, then if there is only a vertical loading, it will be stable. But if by chance there is just a slightly inclined loading, then the which has a horizontal component, then the beam will simply move like this. So it will no longer be a stable structure. And there is also internal indeterminacy, which we studied of trusses in particular, and an overall indeterminacy. And one of the most important topics of structural analysis is how to draw the bending moment and shear force diagrams. So you will be given the beam. Generally it is asked for a beam, it can also be asked for a frame. So you will be given the structure, the boundary conditions, and the loading patterns, everything. And then you have to solve the support reactions and find out the bending moment and shear force at each cross section. So cross section means that if the beam is of length L, and you take distance x from one end, suppose the left end, then x will go from 0 to L, and I can find bending moment and shear force as a function of x. So at each value of x I put, I will get the bending moment or shear force at that point. In week two, we looked at trusses, which are one of the most common idealizations, like one of the simplest idealizations of a structure. Trusses are used in bridges or in roofs of steel factories, like steel structures. So we looked how to idealize them, how to idealize a real world structure into a 2D truss on paper that we can solve easily. Stability of trusses, which is slightly different from stability of beams. There were some additional factors that we saw, that all the support reactions of a truss cannot be parallel, all the support reactions of a truss cannot be collinear. Concurrent cannot be concurrent, cannot be collinear. So in that case the truss will be unstable. And also in a truss, there can be no rectangular or polygonal structure. They have to be or they have to be constructed by triangles basically, because if there is a rectangular component, even if it is externally unstable, it will have internal instability, because it will have a chance of folding in upon itself. And then we looked at how to solve the member forces in a truss by two methods of joints, method of sections. In week 3, we looked at the principle of virtual work, the unit load method to determine displacements in trusses. So in the week 2 we saw how to find out the member forces, and if we divide the member force by area, we will get the member stresses in each of the members. And here we saw how to find the displacement and every node of the truss. So there are basically two separate classes of responses in a structure that undergoes loading. One is the force or stress type of responses, and the other is the displacement or strain type of responses. The force type or stress type responses give rise to the ultimate or collapse limit states in our codes, and the displacements give rise to the serviceability limit states. Both of them are important, and both of them need to be a part of structure analysis. So when we are analyzing a structure, we are given the structure, we are given the boundary conditions, we are given the loading, and we have to find out the response of the structure, which are of two types, the stresses and the strains. In week 4, the previous week, we looked at deflection of beams. So displacement, so in a truss, it is relatively simple to say what we mean by displacements. We just need to find out the displacement, the x displacement and y displacement in at each node. But in a beam, just like we get a bending moment and shear force diagram that varies along the length of the beam, similarly we also get a deflection pattern. So if there is a beam and there is some kind of loading, the beam will have a profile, a displacement deflection profile. So as we move along the length of the beam, at each x, if x goes from 0 to L, we will find it has a vertical displacement. So that is called the deflection. There will be a sign convention. So a positive one may probably mean that it has gone upward, and a negative one means it has gone downwards. It can also be the reverse. So week 4 and this week also, we are going to look at deflection of beams, how to find them. There are several methods. One method is the elastic curve equation method, where we start from the governing differential equation of the beam. That is, it is related to the moment. So we need the bending moment equation in terms of x, and by twice integrating it, we can get the y as function of x if y is the vertical displacement. It is a very general method. If we know the governing differential equation of any system, we can integrate it and get the displacement profile. And once we have the y of x function, we can find out the deflection at any point if we put the value of x there. So it is a general, and it is also a little cumbersome at times. So there are simpler methods. Moment area method is based on the principle of elastic curve method. I mean, the elastic curve method is the basic and the most fundamental method. Moment area method is basically a shortcut created. It has two. There are two moment area theorems, which lets us relate. Suppose we want the deflection or the slope at a particular point, we can find out, we can construct the problem in such a way that we can relate the slope of at that point to slope of another point, and we can even need the bending moment diagram, the m by ei diagram for this. And we have to choose the points very specifically, which comes from experience and practice, to apply the moment area methods. And in this week, we are going to look at the conjugate beam method. This can also be said to be a variation of the moment area method. It is also a shortcut method that lets us get the deflection of beam. Like the deflections can be of two types. One is the vertical displacement, another is the rotation. The rotation is basically the y dash of x. Y of x is the displacement, and y dash of x, so that is the dy dx is the slope. So the conjugate beam method also lets us get the displacement and deflection and slope at any particular point, and it also works with the M by EI diagram as we are going to look at now. First, we are going to look at some terminologies in beam theory that we have looked at last class, but we need to revise it once. So, the neutral surface, a beam is formed of many fibers aligned longitudinally. Under action of downward transverse loads, fibers near the top of the beam contract, whereas fibers near the bottom of the beam extend. The so here, if it is a sagging moment that force is downward, then it will sag. This is called a sagging moment being developed in the beam. So we can visualize that the topmost fiber is going to compress, is going to shorten a little bit, and the bottom fibers are going to elongate. So there will be a profile of elongation or and shortening of the length of the beam. So somewhere in the middle of this, there will come a point, there will come a level where there is neither elongation nor shortening. This is called the neutral axis of the beam, and the plane of that, since the beam is a three-dimensional body, we idealize it as a one-dimensional body. We ignore the cross-sectional area while we are calculating the bending moment or the deflection, but it has a cross-sectional area. So this is the neutral axis, and if you look at the plane that goes into the beam, that is the neutral plane. So the neutral plane the neutral surface where the fibers of the beam do not change their length are called the neutral surface, and where it intersects one, if this is the surface of the beam, and where the neutral axis intersects, this is called the neutral axis. The axis of the beam is the interaction of the neutral surface and the longitudinal symmetry. So this is the neutral axis in when it is drawn a 2D body. Deflection curve. When the beam is loaded, the neutral axis or surface deforms into a curve, which is called the deflection curve or elastic curve. So basically, the entire beam deflects in some manner, but since we are doing it as y as a function of x, we are just taking we are with which x are we considering? We are considering the x along the neutral axis because the beam has a depth, and it is not a one-dimensional body; it is a three-dimensional body. Here we are looking as a neutral axis, it is a single line, and that line is how the x varies, and the y of x is the deflection profile is the y of x considering how the neutral axis deforms. Now we move on to the conjugate beam method, a structural analysis technique used to analyze beams and frames by transforming real beams into imaginary or conjugate beams. So this is just an idealization. We are not actually converting it. We are just, for every real beam, we can construct a conjugate beam with there are certain rules, certain pretty straightforward rules. From that, we get a conjugate beam, and by solving the we can find out the bending moment of that beam, and from that we can get the not okay no I'll go into the rules now. We apply principles of virtual work and static equilibrium on conjugate beams to solve for unknowns and understand the behavior of the real beam under various loading conditions. So these unknowns are commonly the deflection, the displacements, and the rotations. There is a principle of duality between real beams and imaginary beams. The real beam is subjected to loads and support conditions. So the real beam is what I have been given. As I said, it's a beam. It has given support conditions, the boundary conditions. It has certain loading, and I'm interested in finding out how what is the deflection profile and the rotation profile. So it is transformed into an equivalent imaginary beam, also called the conjugate beam, It has the same length as the real beam, and it is subjected to loads equivalent to the bending moments along the length of the real beam. So I have the real beam and the boundary conditions and the load. For that, I can draw the bending moment diagram. I have learned that in the very beginning of this course. We know. So we draw the bending moment diagram, and then in the conjugate beam, we draw a beam of the same length, and the loading is, we forget about the real loading. If there suppose there was a uniformly distributed load, we and for that we know that the bending moment diagram will be a parabola. So in the conjugate beam, we forget about the uniformly distributed load, and the parabola that was the bending moment diagram of the real beam is the loading in this conjugate beam. And the transformation simplifies the analysis process. That is why we are doing it. And now the one part of the beam is still of the conjugate beam is still unknown. It is the support reactions. How will the support reactions vary for from the real beam to the conjugate beam? We know the length of the conjugate beam, we know the loading of the conjugate beam, but do not yet know the support conditions. So let's look at the rules for loading in conjugate beam. The M by EI diagram of real beam is load on conjugate beam. The sign convention is same as that of bending moment diagram. So if we have seen here in the bending moment diagram in the first class that for sagging moment, so sagging moment which is clockwise from the left side and anti-clockwise from the right side, we call it positive. So if we get a sagging moment in the real beam, it will be upward loading in the conjugate beam. And this is a hogging moment which is anti-clockwise from the left side and clockwise from the right side. It is negative, so it will be downwards. So we have to, when we are finding out the moment diagram, bending moment diagram in the real beam, we will of course we will already have the sign, because when we draw it with sign. So that the sign is the same. So if the diagram is above the, however we draw, we put positive the positive part above the line of the beam, so that will be an upward loading. And if there is a part below the line of the beam, it will be a downward loading. So positive or sagging bending moment will be upwards load, negative or hogging bending moment will be downwards load. So this is suppose this is the real diagram for positive moment. If we This is the moment diagram. EI will be commonly, it will be constant for the entire beam cross section. E is the Young's modulus. I is the second moment of area, or the moment of inertia. So we will just divide this entire diagram by EI. What will happen is, since these are linear, only this peak value we will divide by EI. So it will go to zero accordingly. All the values will be just divided by EI. So we have the M by EI diagram, and then the conjugate beam diagram for deflection and slope analysis. It will be an upward load, since this moment is positive, of the magnitude M by EI at each point. And rules for boundary conditions in conjugate beam. So this is a real beam. It has a fixed support, suppose. So V means downward deflection. V means vertical deflection. Theta means rotation. And here the see, along the beam, the x direction displacement here is not considered, because a beam is not supposed to undergo axial loading. So if there is a fixed support, there are two criteria: V is zero, theta is zero. And in a conjugate beam, it becomes a free end. So neither V is restrained nor theta is restrained. So it is free to displace. It is free to rotate. So what I know at a free end is that there is no support moment. So M is zero, and there is no support shear reaction. So the Q is zero. So basically, in a beam at any point, we either know the displacement or we know the shear force, and we either know the rotation or we know the moment. So in a fixed support, we know that the rotation is zero, so the support moment is unknown to us. While in a real while a free end, the rotation is unknown to us, it can rotate, and so the bending moment is known to us, it will be zero, because if there was some moment constraint, if there was some support moment there, then it will not be free to rotate. So here what happens is a fixed support becomes a free end. And a free end where V is not equal to 0, theta is not equal to 0, it becomes a fixed support where the moment is not equal to 0 and the shear is not equal to 0. So there will be some support reaction, there will be some support shear force, some support moment. A hinge support remains a hinge support. At a hinge support, what we know is that the vertical displacement V is 0 and theta is not equal to 0, it is free to rotate. And in the hinge support, it remains a hinge support where the moment is 0 and the shear force is not 0, because it provides a support shear reaction, but it does not provide any restraint moment, so it is free to rotate. A middle support, which is also called a knife edge, is turns into an internal hinge, and an internal hinge converts into a knife edge. So it is a duality kind of thing. So here we know that v is 0 and the theta is continuous. Here the moment is 0 at an internal hinge, the moment is 0 and the shear is continuous. Here, V is and at an internal hinge, V is continuous. Theta is discontinuous because an internal hinge has some discontinuity in theta. So, in the middle support, the M is continuous and the Q is discontinuous. We'll look at an example. So, this is a real beam. So, okay, I'll just wait for 5 minutes if you want to try the. This is a very simple problem. It is a cantilever beam with a fixed support and a point load at one this end. So if you want to try to draw the conjugate beam, I'll wait for 5 minutes. So if this is the real beam. There is a cantilever beam with a fixed end and a point load at one end. For the conjugate beam, we will first draw the bending moment diagram of this. We know that if we solve the support reaction, we will see that there will be a 3 kilopound load here, the reaction here. So if we, and there will be a moment 3 into 12. So since this is a anti-clockwise moment, there will be a clockwise support reaction here. 12 into 3, so 36 here, and this is a negative moment here, since this is a hogging moment. Negative because by the sign convention, we know that if there is clockwise moment at the, when we come from the right, it is a hogging moment, negative moment. So this is 36, and here at this end, since this is a free end, it is free to rotate, so there will be no support reaction. So that this moment here will be 0, and we will join it by a straight line. As we have seen in bending moment, if there is no uniformly distributed load, if there is only a point load, we will just join it by a straight line. The moment at any point will vary linearly. So to get the m by ei diagram, we just divide this value by ei. It will very linearly just the same. So when I draw the conjugate beam, the loading, the length remains same. It is 12 feet. The loading is the triangle in the downward direction like this. And the support reaction, we know that a free end becomes a fixed end in a conjugate beam, and a fixed end becomes a free end in a conjugate beam. So this remains a cantilever, but in the opposite sense. So here there is a fixity, here there is a free end, and there is a downward loading in the shape of a triangle. So this is not a uniformly distributed load. This is a triangularly varying load. Now my now this is how I have drawn the beam. Now I want to extract the response of the real beam from the conjugate beam, which is the purpose. We are constructing the conjugate beam so that we can get the responses, that is the deflection and the rotation of the real beam, in a simple manner. So these are the rules. Bending moment diagram at any section of the conjugate beam is equal to the deflection of the elastic curve at the corresponding section of the real beam. So it means that if I ask, tell me the deflection at this point A, then all I need is to find out the bending moment at A for this conjugate beam, not for this. This is the bending moment diagram of the real beam. Now I have the loading on the conjugate beam. Now I have to draw another bending moment diagram, or I just have to find out the bending moment at this point. I don't have to find the entire diagram. If I find the bending moment at A, I'd have the deflection at A in the real beam, and shear force at any section of the conjugate beam is equal to the slope of the elastic curve at the corresponding section of the real beam. So again, at this point, if I ask, give me the rotation at this point, because it is free to rotate, it is a free end. For that I have to find out the shear force at this point. We don't actually have to draw the shear force diagram or the bending moment diagram, because generally you will be asked only at a single point. Like I will ask you to find the slope or deflection at a particular point, so you just need to find out the bending moment or the shear force at that point, and you will have the deflection and the rotation. And the sign convention, as always, is very important. Positive shear force in conjugate beams equals positive slope in real beam, and positive moment in conjugate beams equals a positive deflection, that is upward movement of the real beam. For this, the sign conventions of bending moment and shear force must be quite clear to you. The sign convention that you use to draw the loading is what is the sign convention you have to use here as well. So we will stick to the same sign convention. We have studied the BMD and SFD in the first class, and that which is what we get in most books. So these are the general steps of solving the responses of a beam using the conjugate beam method. First, we draw the real beam with all loads and support conditions. Then we determine the support reactions using equilibrium equations. Then we are going to draw the conjugate beam with loading corresponding to M by EI diagram of the real beam. So when we have determined the support reactions, we can easily draw the the moment diagram, the bending moment diagram. And the conjugate beam will have loading corresponding to M by EI of the real beam. Then we are going to apply the boundary conditions as per the rules we have seen. That is, a fixed support becomes a free end becomes a fixed support, a hinge remains a hinge. Then we will solve for bending moment using concept of virtual work or the regular technique to draw BMD of the conjugate beam. Again, you might not need to draw the entire BMD. You might just have to find out the bending moment at a particular section where that you have been asked to find the deflection, and we will convert back to the real beam, convert the obtained bending moments and shear force into displacements and slope of the real beam. Now note one thing, that since the length of the real beam and the conjugate beam are the same, you will draw them. So if you, if I ask, suppose the length is 2 meter, and I ask you to find out, try to give me the responses, there is a deflection or the rotation at a point 0.5 meter from the left end. So the conjugate beam also has the same length, and once I have the loading pattern on the conjugate beam, the section which I'm concerned about in the conjugate beam to find the bending moment and the shear force will also be zero point 0.5 meter from the left. So the lengths are corresponding in both the beams. Even though the loading pattern and the boundary condition change, the lengths and and the relativity of each point. So if I tell x meter from the left end in the real beam, it is x meter from the left end in the conjugate beam as well. So that is that is one simplicity. We are going to look at a few examples now. So this was the beam that we had earlier. We drew the conjugate beam. Now using the conjugate beam method, determine slope and deflection at point A of the cantilever beam. So since you already have this, I'll wait for 2 minutes to, if you want to find out the, you want to find out the bending moment and shear force at this point, from where you will get the deflection and slope. So we look at the solution of this. First, we have to draw the M by EI diagram, which we have already looked at before. So the moment diagram is a linear diagram that varies from 36 by EI to here. This is the M by EI diagram. So it will have a downward triangular loading in the conjugate beam, and this is the free end has become a fixed support, and the fixed support has become a free end. Now, uh, for the conjugate beam is loaded with the M by EI diagram shown, where the free end in the real beam becomes fixed in the conjugate beam, while the fixed end in the real beam becomes free in the conjugate beam. The M by EI diagram is applied a downward load in the conjugate beam because it is negative. Now we want to find out the slope at A. The slope at A in the real beam is the shear at A in the conjugate beam. So if I want to find out the shear at A, what I basically need is, I need to solve the support reaction at A, to the support vertical reaction at A, because there is a downward loading, and there is only one support reaction that provides support in the vertical direction. There is nothing here. If there was a hinged or a support or a roller here, of course I could not just take the downward load, but since there is only one support, the total magnitude of this downward load is equal to the shear reaction at this point A. So what is the total downward load? When we had a UDL, what did we do? If I have a UDL of magnitude W along the length 12, then the total magnitude would be 12 into W, right? So that is basically the area of the triangle. The triangle has a length of has a height of W, and it has a length of 12, so 12 into W. So when there is a triangular loading, the magnitude will be the area of this triangle. It will be half into 12 into 36 by EI. So this is half into 12 into 36 by EI is the shear at A. So the sign convention will be the same as we have seen. So the slope, so since the force is downward, since the applied force is downwards, the support reaction will be in the upward direction. So that would be a positive slope, and positive slope here translates to anti-clockwise rotation. You have to remember this. So the slope in the real beam at point A is this, and when you put the values of E and I, you will get it in terms of radians. You can convert it into degrees if you want, and it is anti-clockwise since it is positive. And to find the deflection at A, the deflection at A in the real beam equals to the moment at A of the conjugate beam. So that is again going to be the support moment at this developed at this point. So how do we find the support moment? We find out the total force, which we already have. The total force is half into 12 into 36 by EI. And where are we going to consider it equivalently applied? If it was a UDL, we considered that the force was concentrated at the midpoint of the length of application of the UDL. Since it is a triangular load, we will they'll take the equivalent point load at the centroid. The centroid of this triangle is 12 by 3 from the base of it. So it is 12 by 3, 4 feet from B and 8 feet from A. So the total magnitude of of the force is half into 12 into 36 by EI, and it is applied at a length of 8 feet from A. So I have to multiply these two to get the moment. Half into 12 into 36 by EI into 2/3 of 12, which is 8, and this is negative because the force here is the moment applied by this force is clockwise. So the moment generated here will be anti-clockwise, and that is when we are coming from the left side, that is a negative moment. So this is negative. The same sign convention will be used. So that, as we have seen before, the deflection of the real beam at point A is this. When you put the values of E and I, you get it you get it in feet basically. You convert it into inches, and it is downwards since it comes to be negative. This is the second example. This is a simply supported beam with a point load at the center. So I want to determine the slope at the support A and the deflection under the concentrated load. Now, if I asked you find out the deflection at point A, you are not going to don't just blindly start drawing the conjugate beam or going into the moment area method. If I ask the deflection at A, it will of course be zero since there is a support here. These are some extremely simple things that people miss, but so here you are asked to determine the slope at A. Since at A there is a hinge support which does not provide any support moment. So at A the beam is free to rotate completely. So that slope for me is unknown, and the deflection at the concentrated load is unknown since there is no restraint here. So what I do is I have to draw the conjugate beam. For the conjugate beam, I know that the hinge support and roller support remains the same. And why is it so? Because we didn't study the roller support earlier, but for a pin support and a roller support are basically the same thing. Since the hinge also provides the force in a restraint in the horizontal direction, but in a beam we generally assume there is no axial loading, so a hinge support remains a hinge support, a roller support remains a roller support. Now I have to draw the bending moment diagram. Since the loading is symmetrical and the boundary condition is also symmetrical, the support reactions will be, since the load is 24, it will be 12 and 12 upwards. And the bending moment diagram, if we draw, we'll see it is joined by two straight lines like this. And the magnitude here will be 24 into 15. Sorry, 12 into 15. Since the support reaction here is 12 into 15, that is 180. So this is the M by diagram. and it is a sagging moment, it is a positive bending moment. So when I'm drawing the conjugate beam, I have to do an upward loading here. So the magnitude here is 180 by EI, and the loading is a triangle in the upward direction. It is an upward loading basically, which we generally do not encounter in real beams, but in conjugate beam we often find that. So first we will draw the bending moment diagram and divide it by the flexural rigidity. This EI term, where E is the Young's modulus and I is the moment of inertia, it is also called the flexural rigidity. We obtain the moment curvature diagram, M by EI diagram. For the conjugate beam, we have done the loading, and at A and C, which are simple supports in the real beam, remain the same in conjugate beam. The M by EI diagram is applied as an upward load in the conjugate beam because it is positive. Now what have I been asked? I want this slope at support A. So I basically want to find out the shear force at the point A, the shear force developed at the support A, and I want the deflection under the concentrated load. So at the midpoint, I need the moment developed in the midpoint. It is not a support moment; it is just the moment developed. So the first thing I have to do is to solve the support reactions. To solve the support reaction of the conjugate beam, it is it is still a symmetric structure. So the boundary condition is remain symmetric and the loading is also symmetric. So I will take the total load and divide it by 2 to get the shear forces, the shear reactions at the both ends. So the reaction at support of the conjugate beam will be AY equal to BY is half. So the total load is half into 30 into 180 by EI. As I said, the total magnitude of the force of a triangular loading is the area under that triangle. So the length is 30, the the height is 180 by EI, and we have to multiply a half because it is a triangle. So the force at each end will be half of that again. So half of 30 into 180 into half, and there is an EI here, 180 by EI, and it is negative since the loading is upward. The support reaction at the roller and the hinge will be downwards. So the support reaction is this. The slope at A in the real beam is the shear force at A in the conjugate beam. The shear at A is what we just calculated. So the slope A in the slope at support A of the real beam is this. We put the value of EI and get something in radian. You can convert it into degrees. And since this is negative, it is clockwise rotation. As this is just the one thing that you have to remember separately. That is the positive bending moment and negative bending moment translate very simply into upward deflection and downward deflection, but the rotation is not that intuitive. So if you get a positive shear force, it means anti-clockwise rotation, and negative shear force means clockwise rotation, as in here. And to find the deflection at B in the deflection at B in the real beam equals to the moment developed at B of the conjugate beam. The moment at B in the conjugate beam, let's see how to find that. I know the support reaction here. So so the moment, if I'm coming from the left side, the moment at B will have two components: one due to the support reaction at A, and one due to the triangular loading up to B. Do not look at this side. We have already studied this, but this is a revision of how to find out bending moment at any point. So due to this support reaction A, I will have a clockwise moment of that support reaction into 15. Since the lever arm here is AB 15, and due to this triangular part, I will have the magnitude of half into 15 into 180 by EI, and it will act at a point which is 15 by 3 from the base. So from B it will have 15.3, and since it is upwards, it will give a clockwise moment, and sorry, the support reaction will give an anti-clockwise moment. So let's see here. MB is 1 by EI. This is the moment provided by the support reaction, and half into 15 into 180 is the magnitude of the triangular load, and it acts as a length at a distance of 15 by 3 from B. So I get a net negative bending moment at that point. The deflection at B of the real beam is my minus 1.01 inch, and it is in the downward direction. So this is the summary of the deflection of beams. Suppose I have this beam, a simply supported beam with a UDL. The basic governing differential equation which we have looked at in the last class is EI d2y dx square is m of x. x, the moment m is the bending moment that varies along the length of the beam. So x goes from a to b or b to a. So it goes from 0 to L generally, we can say. There is a method of double integration. This method involves integrating the equation of elastic curve twice. So if I integrate this twice, I will get, since this is a double derivative of y with respect to x, if I integrate it twice with dx, I will end up with the equation of y in terms of x, like y as a function of x. The first integration yields the slope, and the second integration gives the deflection. So x is the deflection, and dy dx or y dash x is the slope. The constant of integration are determined considering the boundary conditions. Then the moment area method that we also studied in last class. This method uses two theorems to determine the slope and deflection at specified points on the elastic curve of the beam. The two theorems are as follows. First, moment area theorem: change in slope between any 2 points on the elastic curve of a beam equals the area of the M by EI diagram between those 2 points. So this is a, suppose this is a cantilever beam with a point load P here. I will draw the M by EI diagram, and a theta of AB, so theta of A minus theta of B will be the area of M by EI diagram between A and B. Second moment area theorem: vertical deflection of a point A from the tangent drawn to the elastic curve at point B equals the moment of the area under the M by EI diagram between these 2 points about A. So if I have this is a M by EI diagram. The tangent drawn to the elastic curve at point B is a straight line here, is a horizontal straight line here. Since this was a fixed support, it did not undergo any rotation. It stays a straight. The tangent remains a straight line. There is no rotation. So this delta A of B, this delta AB is basically the distance between the deflected point A and where it cuts the tangent of B, and that is equal to the moment of the M by EI diagram about A. So I will take the area of this, and I am going to multiply it with this term, with this length x dash, which will be 2/3 of the total length, which will be the basically the centroid of the triangle. And conjugate beam method. A conjugate beam has been defined as an imaginary beam with the same length as that of the actual beam, but with a loading equal the M by ER diagram of the actual beam. The supports in the actual beams are replaced with fictitious supports with boundary conditions that will result in the bending moment and the shear force at a specific point in a conjugate beam, equaling the deflection and slope respectively at the same points in the actual beam. So this is just another example. It is a simply supported beam with 2 point loads. The M by EI diagram will look like something like this. So in my conjugate beam, the supports will remain the same since it is a hinge and roller support, and since this is a sagging moment, negative moment, a positive moment. So there is upward loading in the conjugate beam. So that's all. Are there any questions? These three are the methods that we have that we look at to find the displacement or strain types responses in the beam. The bending moment and the shear force were basically the force or stress type responses. So if I have the bending moment and shear force along the profile of the along the length of the beam, I can find out the stress at any point. Shear force, we have, you in solid mechanics you would have studied the formula of shear stress and bending stress. Bending stress, for example, is MY/I. There is a formula like that, and for shear stress there is a formula called VQ/IB. So V and M are the shear force and the bending moment, and the rest are all geometric parameters or geometric or material parameters. So we can get the stress responses already. We have already found how to find determine those. And in the previous week and this week, we have looked at how to find out the deflection profile of the beam. So if I have the deflection at any point and also the rotation, I can find out how much strain is developed in the beam. So structure analysis is basically about those two. I have to find the force or stress type responses, and I have to look at the displacement or strain type responses. So far, we have, for determinate structure, this is all we are going to do. And in the next class, we will look at influence line diagrams, which is how which is at the response of a beam under moving loads. So far, we have only looked at static loading. So when we have the loading pattern, we assume they remain constant with time. If there is a point load at the center, a point, that is the only loading we are considering. But in bridges or in roads, we know that the wheel loads move and all that. So that is where influence line diagrams will be useful. But so far we have only looked at static responses. Are there any questions on this topic or any of the previous ones? Okay. If there is no question, you can leave the class. I'll stay for a little bit if you need. Do you have any questions? Because I finished talking about conjugate beams. If you have any question, you can ask.